start. Welcome everybody to the SIETAR Europa Webinar. Welcome to Patricia Stokke, who is our presenter today. Thank you very much for sharing with us where you are based right now or where you are coming from. We've got plenty of people from Europe, from Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, France, from London, from Cambridge in Great Britain. But we've got also plenty US Americans. I can see right now Andrea from San Francisco. There are also people from Vermont. And welcome people from the northern part of Europe. You've got also participants from Helsinki, and from the south, from Switzerland, from Kiev, from many, many corners of the world. And we've got also a participant from New Jersey just joining us, and Mumbai. So you have just discovered the function of the chat window, which is great. So please make sure that whenever you've got questions regarding our presentation, that you write them down in this chat window. And we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so 10 to 7 Central European Time, 10 to 10 in the morning in the US. We are going to answer all the possible questions. And very, very warm welcome to Patricia, who devoted her research to this excellent subject, very relevant in our intercultural field, global leadership development lessons from global nomads, as she herself is a global nomad. Currently, she is based in the US, in Santa Cruz, California, where she is working as a college professor and a consultant. She's a very, very big cat lover, and she loves the beach, so a perfect location for her. And Patricia actually is thinking of relocating once again in her life, this time to Portugal in a couple of years. So Patricia, we are very, very eager to hear from you, and we are very, very curious about the lessons we can learn from the global nomads regarding the leadership development.
So should I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I just want to thank you, Joanna, for your introduction and for your help facilitating today. And Steve, also, thank you for your help. Thank you, SIETAR Europa, for inviting me to give this presentation. And to all of you who are attending from everywhere around the world, thank you for coming, and thank you to those who are listening to the recording for being a part of this conversation. And I hope that we can continue the conversation beyond today's presentation. I would love to hear from people and continue looking into this topic. I'm going to mute myself so that you can focus on the presentation during the rest of the time here. So I'm gonna make my picture go away. There we go. So to begin, I would like to just give you a few definitions so that we are sure to be talking about the same topics. Want to get the definitions straight between us. Also, talk about some of the shared skills between leaders and global nomads. Also look at how the international experience of global nomads may develop leadership skills. And then finally look at some insight into leadership development that we may learn from global nomads' experiences. So everybody has pretty much said where they are from, and I'm so excited to be around other global nomads and other people from around the world. It is what really energizes me, so thank you for coming. And then I was also interested in what is the focus of your work and your interests. Are you in HR, a consultant, internal or external? Are you an educator or a student? Intercultural competence, is that your focus? So if you could just type in the text box so I get an idea of what the background of some of you are, that would be really great.
So please share with us what is the focus of your work, so that Patricia has got a good overview who is listening to the presentation. We've got intercultural trainers, team development coaches, someone who has relocated internationally many times and is a trainer right now, a global project manager and a trainer focusing on intercultural training, belonging and identity trainer, trainer and coach, independent coach, consultant and researcher interested in mainstreaming, cross-cultural trainers, international teams coach and consultant, diversity management, cross-cultural communication as well, international business English training and cross-cultural communication. And then we've got also university teachers, career services director at the International Educational, PhD student in intercultural studies, and an adult third culture kid who has worked vastly internationally. Mediator. We've got also a trainer of time management working with international teams, and a lecturer for transition topics like global citizenship, global competence. So we've got a very, very great variety of people who are listening to you, Patricia.
That's great. And then just curious as to what drew you to this session and what you hope to take away today, so I can also get a better picture of what you're hoping to hear. If you could just type a few words into the text box, just briefly, that would be great.
So we've got an answer from Pia. Always interested in new methods. Oh, George is George Simons in writing nostalgia. Dawn is writing, I'm interested in anything on the subject. And Alina, the title, Global Nomads Leadership. Natalia adds new insights into international leadership globally, actually. Emma, universal traits of good leadership. Tami, my PhD research topic in cross-cultural leadership. Fantastic, you can stay in touch. Patricia is also available per email afterwards. And new ideas and methods of global nomads and leadership. The topic interested me, Karin is writing, and I hope to learn about new perspectives and methods to improve global leadership. Then we've got Cordula's answer, shared experience on global leadership issues, working with people in leadership roles in international groups. This is what Tracy is writing. And also Nanette is adding her expectations, insight into the subject, sharing info with attendees. Bettina is mostly interested in your experiences, and Nancy in new ideas, interchange, and obviously your input. There is not much material about nomads. This is what Gerla is writing. So I'm sure your list of resources will be very, very helpful at the very end. And yeah, new insights. This is the comment from Wilhelmina, and I'm sure this is really the main reason why people have also joined. And George Simons is also adding, nomads have much various rich culture and shouldn't deny it. So these are the...
Okay, this is good. So we have a lot of different thoughts, but same focus on looking at global nomads. So let's go ahead and get going on that. So leadership and global leadership, what are those? Well, they're all about the process of influencing others to facilitate change, to foster growth, and it's all characterized by the levels of complexity. And if we break down Mendenhall's definition, which I've done here, is to look at the comparison between global leaders and domestic leaders. Everyone, whether you are an informal leader or a formal leader, needs to be able to influence others, facilitate change, foster growth, and will do these things in a level of complexity. And that, I think, is what really differentiates perhaps a domestic from a global leader, is a level of complexity. Although as our world has become more and more connected technologically, and there's more immigration, etc., all of those things have led us to having to work with people who are different from ourselves, whether we're in our home country or we're traveling to another country or living in another country. Perhaps we're working in a virtual team, for instance. So the levels of complexity really are what make the challenge of leadership, and that's where the connection to global nomads comes in, because they live in complexity. So global leaders, they're individuals who are thinking and leading and acting with a global perspective. Adler and Bartholomew talk about how global leaders are expected to overcome ethnocentric mindset and develop an openness and an understanding to other perspectives. And if we look at global mindset itself, it's the ability to influence others who are from a different intellectual, social, or psychological background. Havidan also likes to say, and I find really interesting, that global mindset, or if you have global mindset, it's about being comfortable with being uncomfortable in uncomfortable situations. So I'll say that again. So being comfortable with being uncomfortable in uncomfortable situations. So if you take just a moment to think about, when was the last time, or maybe any time recently, where you have been in an uncomfortable situation? How comfortable were you with being uncomfortable in that uncomfortable situation? Were you able to navigate and find your way through it? Your ability to do that may be something that is connected to global mindset, but don't worry if you're someone who is a little more uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. It's okay, because it's a skill that one can develop. It's not set in stone. So looking at our definition today for expats and adult third culture kids, expats are those who are living in another country with the expectation of return, and they're living in another country because of their job. For instance, my family moved to Japan when I was growing up. My father was working for Japan Airlines as an airline captain, and so we went there because of his job. And then adult third culture kids are those who have spent time during their formative years in a country other than their parents' country. So I'll put that up for you to see more specifically. Give you a moment just to look that over. And I'm using the term global nomad to be inclusive today in talking about expats and adult third culture kids. Norma McCaig, excuse me, started using global nomad for, excuse me, adults who've had the childhood experience of growing up abroad. And more people are using that term as a generic term, as I will be today, to talk about anyone who's had some kind of a cross-cultural experience. And the thing that is unique about the third culture kid experience is that the first culture is the home or the parents' culture or country. So in my case, that was the US. The second culture is the host culture, which is Japan in my case. And then the third is this in-between space, this interstitial space. It's neither home nor your host cultures, and often individuals feel like they just don't fit anywhere. So this diagram for you gives you a picture of what it might be like. Pretend that those little blue dots are globes, and those are representative of different cultures. And so a third culture kid or adult third culture kid or an expat, they're living between these different worlds. They're living between different cultures and often having to go back and forth between those. And that's what creates so much of the complexity in their lives. Yes?
A short comment from Corinne, actually, regarding your comment, living between worlds. She is writing, I'm a serial immigrant, not an expat.
Right. And I am just about ready to address that.
Yeah.
So on the next slide, you'll see where the terms CCKs and CCAs, as Ruth Van Raken and David Pollock wrote the book, Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds. And as she has continued going around the world speaking and working with schools and individuals who've had cross-cultural experiences, she's found that there's people who have all kinds of different international cross-cultural experiences that may not fit into the exact definition of a third culture kid or of an expat, but their cross-cultural experience has contributed to them developing similar characteristics as third culture kids. And so she started using the term cross-culture kids to be more inclusive. And then Paulette Bethel started using the term cross-cultural adults for those who've lived in one place while they were growing up, but then as adults, they began moving around. So immigrants, just as the one participant brought up, a serial immigrant. So the differentiator with the third culture kid or an expat is that there's that expectation of returning to the original country or culture. But there are many people, especially today, who aren't returning. They're staying in that new country or culture or moving on to another one. And so they are having a cross-cultural experience. And there's a lot of value, just as with third culture kids. So I wanted to include this so that we're inclusive of all cross-cultural experiences. And as we go forward, I hope that everyone will think about, as our one participant was, their own experience and how it might fit into this research. And we have a lot to learn from all of these different people's experiences. So I'd like to know from you, how many of you have had some sort of cross-cultural experience, either as a third culture kid, cross-culture kid, expat, cross-culture adult, or some other experience that maybe I didn't list on the previous slide. If you could put that in the text box, that would be really great. Or I think that Joanna has a poll for you all to fill in. Do you have that up, Joanna? Joanna, did I lose you? Oh, I don't hear you. What happened?
This is Steve. I don't know. Maybe we did lose her, but people are typing into the chat. So
Okay, but
some good information. Third culture kid, CCK and CCK, expat, worked in 45 countries, lived in 4 countries, expat mothers, wow, lots of input here. Grew up wildly diverse, immigrant US, expat, CCA, lived in 4 different countries so far, lived in 4 countries, mixed race marriage, domestic cross-culture kid, expat, went to school abroad and lived in 3 countries as an adult.
Lots of interesting experiences.
Lots of them.
Yes, and someone mentioned a multicultural marriage. Yes, that is definitely something. You have these multiracial, multicultural families. So a family experience is definitely one that can be cross-cultural as well.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you all for sharing that background.
Well,
really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for sharing in detail. I'm sorry I was muted, and somehow right now I can share with you the poll, so you can also see the poll right now, and have a look.
Oops, that was the first wrong one. That's the feedback one.
That's the feedback one. Sorry. So it's not the one I wanted to have. I wanted to have this one. So right now.
Oh well.
Can you see the poll?
No,
No.
I don't.
Okay.
Well, oh, here we go.
Right now you can see it.
And I don't know.
So right now you can exactly decide third culture kid, cross culture kid, expat, educational career, or other. And Patricia, you can see that the expat experience is prevailing.
Okay.
Other, we've got with 41% currently. And yeah, as our participants wrote down in detail their experiences, you have a better overview what is meant by other experiences, yeah?
Yeah.
So for example, working as an au pair in another family.
Right, and other, the cross-cultural adult, or I put other there in case someone thought of an experience or had an experience that I didn't mention in the previous slide. So
Yeah.
There's
Thank
always new things emerging. Thank you, everybody, for sharing that.
And we've got 27% of cross-cultural kids. So 1/4 is really here included.
Okay, so let's keep going.
I need to read, sorry, I need to read out this one comment.
Okay.
It's fun, it's enriching, and it's exhausting.
Yes, it is. It can be, definitely. Okay, there, I can see the results. Very good.
So 50% of third culture kids and 27 cross-culture kids.
Good. Okay, so now it's not moving forward. Why not? What happened? Now my computer froze. Oh, there. Okay, so why study global nomads and why did I do this? Well, as I was venturing out on my research and looking into international leadership, I came across third culture kids. And as I researched third culture kids, I found out this is a real topic that people have been researching for a while. And I found that there were similarities in the characteristics between the two groups. And I thought, well, maybe global nomads could be potential leaders and global leaders, and that perhaps we could learn from them about leadership development and the development of intercultural competency and global mindset. And when looking at the literature, I've just parsed out for you the comparisons of global leaders and ATCKs and expats. And you can see that there are overlaps in the different characteristics. So global leaders need to be flexible and adaptable. They need to be open to new experiences and curious, and be able to have conflict management skills. And you can see that those skills are also repeated in ATCKs and in expats, which I'm referring to as global nomads. And my colleague Jeffrey Zimmerman did the research on expats. We found each other later and then put our research together to find this overlap, even greater than what I had found on my own. So also, HR executives in a survey indicated that leaders need to be more diverse in the way they think and the way of their work experiences. So it's very important to have individuals who have these abilities. Interestingly enough, global nomads are often overlooked for leadership positions because their experience of living abroad or living in multiple cultures isn't recognized, particularly for children. So an adult who had a childhood experience, such as myself, people in business often would not recognize a childhood experience as being valuable for a work position, and yet it really does, because it has to do with the hard to teach skills that you can't learn in a workshop, that it takes time. And then also global nomads often don't understand the connections of their experience to leadership competencies, and often have difficulty talking about that experience in a way that others who haven't had it would understand. And we'll look at that some more. So why do they develop some of these characteristics? It has to do with the complexity that I mentioned earlier. And the complexity comes from navigating between these multiple worlds and this cultural switching. So for instance, some individuals who may be a domestic cross-culture kid, they live at home in one culture, and then they go to school in another culture, and then they're going back and forth on a daily basis. Or as an expat, you may live in one place, but then you go back home and you're going back and forth and having to make sense out of these different worlds. And these different worlds don't match. And so you're wondering, how do I make it through? And so navigating that complexity is extremely important. And
Patricia, there is a very, very interesting remark. I think also the need for intercultural competence is often not recognized while hiring leaders.
Right, exactly. And that is something that is a challenge for cross-cultural individuals. And so learning to be able to talk about it in a way that the hiring managers and HR people will recognize is important. And another of my colleagues, Jody Connie-Bear Tangretti, has doing some work on that and developed some videos to help people who are third culture kids, global nomads, understand better how to express their experiences. So let's continue on and look a little bit at my research. The title was Adult Third Culture Kids, Potential Global Leaders with Global Mindset. It was a mixed method study where I did qualitative interviews. I interviewed until I had saturation in those interviews. And the themes were repeated over and over again. As you can see, a high number of surveys. The survey that was conducted was the Global Mindset Inventory. And the Global Mindset Inventory measures 3 capitals: intellectual, psychological, and social, which I've put at the end of the slide deck more information about that you can refer to later. but the Global Nomads, third culture kids, showed an affinity for psychological and social global mindset, whereas the general population did not. And so I've taken some of the global mindset characteristics, such as passion for diversity, and matched them with some of the comments made by the participants in my research. One of the things that was really interesting that I found was that over and over again, the people that I talked to used the same terminology, often the exact same words, as they responded to my questions. So looking at self-assurance, having to do with self-confidence, they are not afraid to move. They actually thrive better when they have the opportunity to be flexible. I thought it was interesting to hear these different stories from individuals and how they were comfortable in these uncomfortable situations. Intercultural empathy, another aspect of global mindset, was shown in the group of adult third culture kids. So overall, from the interviews, revealed that adult third culture kids have often an international focus in their careers, often pursuing entrepreneurship, and they recognize that how important it is to build relationships when you're trying to work across cultural boundaries, and something that can be unique to global nomads. So years ago, Ted Ward, sociologist, did some research, and he said that TCKs are the prototype citizens of the future. And I found it interesting when I came across that quote, because it seemed that my research actually was in alignment and supported his comment that he made years before. So moving now to the other part of the research about expat success that was conducted by Jeffrey Zimmerman. He looked at who is a successful expat and did surveys and interviews. He found that a successful expat was someone who could manage culture shock and not prematurely terminate their overseas assignment, which is definitely an issue often with expats, particularly US American expats. And so what does culture shock have to do with expat success? Well, since so many of you have had a cross-cultural experience, you're probably very familiar with culture shock and that uncomfortable feeling of not being able to interpret the signs and signals of the social interactions going on around you. And this notion can be applied to members of groups, regions, nations, teams, families. Culture shock can appear in all kinds of different cross-cultural experiences. And he found that the skills that were necessary to survive and cope with this cross-cultural experience was a sense of self-efficacy, perseverance, and cultural empathy. He found that in self-efficacy, when he did some interviews, that there was an American expat who found driving in Switzerland difficult, but was able to eventually find his or her way driving in Switzerland. And so that was a sign of confidence. Many expats won't even try to drive in a foreign country. My mother immediately got in the car in Japan, drove on the opposite side of the road, and complained about the Japanese drivers because they drove differently, but she did it. She had the confidence to go forward. An Austrian buying groceries in New York can, I know when I went to Italy and was trying to buy orange juice in the coffee shop. Even just that experience was a little complex and discombobulating at first, but then I figured it out and I was okay. I persevered in that example. The Austrian or the American driving on those Swiss roads persevered despite the temptation to quit. Another important tool of expat success. And then cultural empathy is extremely important in that being able to empathize with people from a different group and having that ability will really help you to reduce the negative effects of culture shock. So how does this all apply to global leadership development lessons? Well, culture shock is an emotional experience. From learning theory, we realize that emotional experiences are those that create shifts in behavior and in our mindset. And since an expat and a TCK or global nomad cross-cultural experience can be very emotional, it has the ability to shift those behaviors. So the question that I keep contemplating and hope that you all maybe have contemplated it and maybe have some input at some point is how do we create these uncomfortable experiences for individuals who haven't had a cross-cultural experience so that they can develop an internal shift regarding intercultural competency. So the approaches that we see often is formal training, but there's new research that's showing that formal training in some cases can be harmful because if you're learning only about cultural niceties, the do's and don'ts, it can often lead to stereotypical behaviors and stereotyping of other groups. So when we work with training, it's very important that we are careful to emphasize that even though there may be trends in a certain culture, there's people are different no matter who they are within a culture. Travel is one that we often hear people talk about. Oh, go on a trip and you're going to be able to experience new cultures. Well, the way you travel is going to make the difference, just as living overseas is going to make the way you live overseas. Because if you're only traveling or getting together with friends who are also on international assignment from your country, you're not going to have the opportunity to experience those other political systems and markets and economics, and you won't learn about those. So other research that's been conducted by Story and then also by Kolb have looked at developmental approaches and experiential learning to try to make a more significant change when it comes to intercultural competency and global leadership. And if we look at experiential learning, we see that we need to create experiences that include thinking and feeling, perceiving. It's really important to create some sort of experience where the individual interacts with the environment. So again, another question, how can we do that with individuals who haven't had cross-cultural experiences? So Kolb says that in order for the experience to be transformational, you have to have all four of these components. So and if you think about your experience in a cross-cultural environment, there may have been a time where you had an experience that triggered some thinking and reflecting, which then led to a different action. So again, how do we do that for those who haven't had the same cross-cultural experience? So taking pieces from each of these researchers and learning theories. I've thought about this and believe that we really need to integrate these experiences with concepts that will lead to observations and actions and provide time for reflection and thinking, something that is often left out when you're doing expat training before the expat leaves, and then while the expat is in the actual assignment. You know, how can we build in experiences that will help them to develop the skills that will allow them to be successful? So these are some different ways. Virtual reality is emerging. It's really interesting. It's expensive still, but I think it's something that we can see. Walmart is using that in their trainings. So large companies are beginning to use it. It's training simulations we've seen for a long time. Video scenarios. There's in your upcoming conference, you're going to have a presentation that's conducted by a couple of individuals who have developed some video scenarios that are really interesting, that I think that if you get a chance to go to the conference, you would enjoy seeing. And Valley Murphy from Intercultural Intersections has been working with Brett Perry on developing those, and I worked with them also in developing the storyline. And I've used it with my students at the graduate and undergraduate level, and found the video scenarios to be very helpful in that they create this lively discussion that creates some connection to emotion. So I have some recommendations.
May I just jump in for a second?
Yep.
There are some comments from our participants regarding your previous chart, and Helen is writing that coaching is really, really helpful. George is adding his comment, seeking contact with locals is essential and actually largely missing in analysis. So this is also what is actually my experience during different intercultural trainings and coachings, that people want to have the do's and don'ts served on the silver tray, and it's not the point. The biggest challenge, but also at the same time the biggest chance, is to get in touch with the local people, to get to know the culture, so to say, firsthand from them.
Right. So just to finish up, I have a couple of recommendations for organizations. I'll just pull a couple out, and then if you'd like, you can go back and look at this in more detail later. But one of those is that organizations should really look to global nomads for global talent. They are, particularly, again, adult third culture kids are overlooked. Organizations need to recognize these unique contributions, particularly when expats return to the home culture, that they have learned something and they have something to offer the organization. And then, of course, adapting the learning and development programs and designing them to have more experiential and development learning components. And for researchers, continue looking into these topics and looking at global nomads to continue learning about development of leadership and intercultural competency, and looking at what kinds of experiences trigger reflection. And then I put other thoughts. So I'm sure some of you have been thinking about ways that you might continue researching this topic. And lastly, individuals. So for those ATCKs, expats, cross-culture individuals, gain an understanding of your professional strengths and capabilities that have come from your cross-cultural experience. Getting a connection to those, if you're coaching, helping your individuals to find those and to connect to those, and think about them for career planning. It will make a huge difference in the satisfaction in your life. I know if I would have figured this out a lot earlier, I think I would have been a lot happier in my life, and that I would have been more comfortable in doing an international thing. And then learning to talk about those experiences, because often monocultural individuals will misunderstand and think when we talk about our experiences that we're bragging about them, or that we think we're better than them. And that's not the case. And so learning about that is really important. And if you are a parent of a TCK, or you're in the expat experience now, really take advantage of that experience to develop your intercultural competency and your global mindset. And just to finish is this quote from Cabrera that I thought was really interesting, is that global leaders are bridge builders, connectors, and they are relentlessly dedicated to finding ways of creating value, and they don't just think and act global, they are global. It's a part of your DNA. So if I was in a room, I'd ask you right now, how many of you feel like global is a part of your DNA? And you're probably raising your hand. So thank you so much. And questions, let's get to the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, very, very cordially. It's a really, really interesting topic, and your research is breathtaking. You have conducted so many research questions with so many people. It's really incredible, and the results are amazing, especially regarding the cultural empathy, you know, how important it is also not only to self-reflect, but also to obviously try to walk a couple of steps in someone's shoes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There are some comments regarding also your presentation, and the very important one, of course, is do you have a literature slide?
Yes, yes, there are following, there are like 3 or 4 literature slides.
Yeah, and also there was one proposal, or even 2 proposals for further literature. Marcel van der Poel, what types of experience develop intercultural competence? And also Laura Mae Gardner, who is writing on resilience overseas and focuses on this issue. So these 2 books are recommended by our participants. They can also be added to the list you are proposing.
That'd be great. I'd love to read them too. So if we could get that written down. Thank you.
Is there any possibility that you are sharing the list with the participants?
Yes, it's at the, here, there's me. There's my email that you can contact me at. But then here you can see there's tons of list, a huge list.
Perfect.
So they can refer back to these. And then there's some that are listed in the slides that may not be in here. So for instance, Zimmerman isn't listed here, but you can find him through Northern Kentucky University if you want to contact him. So Jeffrey Zimmerman, who did the research on expat success.
Okay. Several participants are asking whether you can share the whole slide deck with them.
Yeah, we have, we can do that. I just have to, I guess you could email me and I can send you the PDF if you'd like.
Perfect. So here you can see Patricia's email address at the very bottom of this slide, and this way you are also able to stay in touch with our presenter and get the PDF of the presentation and the list. Fantastic. Thank you very, very much. So these were the really burning questions, as you can imagine, because these were the questions that got repeated. Right now, I would like to ask you to answer two questions that popped up during the presentation, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow. And this is the question from Alina, who actually reacted immediately to your comment that Havidat said that feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable in uncomfortable situations is something typical for the global nomads. She is asking, is it exactly the same as ambiguity tolerance?
I would say yes, that it is very similar. So it's that being comfortable in ambiguous situations, being comfortable with uncertainty.
Okay.
And there are individuals who find it very difficult to not know exactly what's going to happen next. So being able to go with the flow is something that's important. At least that's how we say it in the US. I don't know in other countries how they would say that.
Okay. So Natalia is asking, do you have any statistics about global nomads available? What is an approximate population of global nomads?
Oh, okay. I don't have them at hand. I do have TCKs, the Third Culture Kids, and I think that's in Ruth Van Raken and David Pollock's book, they might list that. I have seen those statistics before, but they might be older. I think that the population is growing as people move more and more and become more global.
Yeah.
But I can't give you the exact statistics. Sorry about that.
Yeah, actually, we've got also people who are very, very interested in the theme among other participants. And Karin is writing, I read that about 300,000 people are true global citizens. This is really a very, very nice answer, Karin, because obviously depending on the definition, this number can vary from research to research.
Right. Yes, I
And
think so.
and one more question. Are there any countries where these global nomads are in higher concentration?
I'm not sure about that. I think at one point, I mean, it's probably changed over the years. I mean, I could imagine that in years past when the UK was more of a global country, if you will, going into other countries that English would be one, and then maybe after World War II, US Americans, and I'm not sure now, maybe somebody else might have an idea about that.
Yeah, actually I have just returned from the Middle East, and the numbers over there were really amazing. Abu Dhabi and Dubai and in general all the Emirates over there, they have the population of 85% of foreigners.
Wow.
Yeah, so they are in their own country in the minority. So I could imagine that they are really at the top. Cordula is adding Singapore as well. This is something also very, very internationally workforce driven, definitely. And Alina is commenting, I don't think becoming a global citizen is something to be achieved in a lifetime.
No.
An ideal we should all as human beings aspire to. I think the global citizenship is a lifelong work in progress.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because it is. I mean, I think as we all know, especially those who've worked with intercultural competency, that it's really a continuum, and we never stop learning. There's always more to learn and more to grow. And myself personally, I just feel, especially in today's world, in some ways, being a global citizen might, in some places, be seen as negative, but I see it as a positive, and I see it something to actually encourage in others that will bring us together as human beings, is trying to, you know, as global nomads, we can build those bridges to bring people together. And perhaps that can be part of our mission in our work.
Yeah, definitely. Patricia, there is also one more question regarding the business world.
Mm-hmm.
How to make organizations more inclined to identify and promote more internationally experienced employees at any level, actually not only managers,
Right.
leaders, but at any level?
How is the question? How do we get them to notice that?
Yeah, that the organizations are more inclined to identify and also to promote more internationally experienced employees. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the questions that, for instance, I mentioned Jody Honeybear, and she and I have talked a lot about that. And one of the things is, I think, learning, for those of us to learn to talk about our experience in a way that connects more directly to the business experience, but also hopefully getting out there and doing some education. I mean, I did do a presentation at an HR conference and hope to do more. But interestingly enough, an HR conference I just went to, I was surprised that there were no sessions on anything having to do with global HR.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a strange dynamic that we're seeing. But any ideas people have, we're all searching for those. And then that's an area to really research, is how do we bridge the difference between those of us who have more of a global perspective to those who may not understand our experience, without them being threatened by it, without them feeling that we are arrogant or thinking that we are better than them, because
exactly
that's really important. And so making that bridge is a huge question mark.
Yeah, George Simons is also asking this question: arrogance of calling oneself a global citizen. Where is the arrogance here? You know?
Yeah, I mean, where's the I think he means why is that error? Is that truly? I don't think it is, but there are people who, you know, who haven't had the same experience, who see it that way. And I was really shocked at one conference I was at. I was in a session, and afterwards I went up to the presenters and started talking about, their connections with global nomads and global leadership. And this individual just really got upset and was saying, well, they just don't necessarily have any experience or knowledge, and they just think they're better than other people. And I was surprised, and it made me step back and think more about it, and also realize why we need to, when we're in that experience, to really take advantage of it so that we do grow in our intercultural competency. Because if I travel to a country and I just stay in hotels that are US American hotels and only talk to Americans while I'm there, I'm not going to get that experience that's going to trigger the thinking and the emotions that will lead to the change that I need.
Definitely. You are still having a look at the environment through this US lens. Yeah.
And I think that is part of the connection too, is that in educational programs, education abroad, that it's extremely important that educators build into their programs activities and experiences so that the students aren't just isolated amongst themselves with the individuals they're comfortable with when they go abroad.
Yeah, yeah. So Patricia, it's really, really interesting, and there are many, many comments in the chat regarding not only global nomads, but also the ideas of culture in terms of nationality, obviously the not only nationality, but also this general idea of a set of norms and values. And there is one more request actually from our participants. Could you also please share where they can find the videos you mentioned that you were also not only involved in production, I think it was also Valley Murphy, but also the videos you mentioned about the TCKs.
Yes,
exactly.
Valley Murphy and intercultural intersections. She worked with Jody in developing those videos.
Oh yeah, sorry, Valley Murphy has just sent the answer. It's conversationclips.com, CLIPS.com. So
oh, she's there. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So check out her website, and you can contact her too. And then also, if you get a chance to go to the SIETAR Europa International Conference, she will be presenting there. So you can get more information from her at that conference as well.
Perfect. Patricia, it was our honor and our pleasure to listen to your presentation. Everybody is in touch because you are so kind to give your email address. Also, you are present on the LinkedIn. So people who are interested in having the PowerPoint presentation as PDF are very welcome to contact you via email best. And you have just mentioned that many of us are going to see one another at the SIETAR Europa conference in Belgium in Leuven in 3 weeks actually. So me, myself and Steve are very, very happy to see you there. We wish you a very, very nice evening. Once again, many, many thanks for this fantastic, very informative and very interactive presentation. We are looking forward not only to the next webinar organized by SIETAR Europa next month, but also we are looking forward to the new format, which is the cross-cultural coffee break. And this month presenter is Joe Kearns. So everybody who is interested, please join us on the 22nd of May again. Many thanks. And
can I interject one thing really quick? I just noticed on this slide that has my other website, Global Nomads, Global Mindset, I left out the E between the S and the T. So
okay.
It's mindset is spelled wrong there. So, but I can fix it on the slides that I send people.
Yes. It's
okay. Thank you so much, everyone. It was really exciting to talk with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being our speaker. You've got many, many thanks from many, many people from all over the world. And one more thank you, which is not only thank you, but also more. Thank you so much, Patricia. I feel very inspired and reassured.
Oh, good. Yes. That's what I hope. Reassured. Yes. Yeah. We all have something special and important to offer to the world. And sometimes it's hidden and we don't realize it.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to bring that forward.
Yes, definitely. So thank you once again. It was my pleasure also to listen to your presentation, but also to facilitate it. And as you saw, there were so many comments, there were so many questions that you see how interesting and how burning this theme is. So it was very, very good for our field just to have new, actually not only new, but the newest research, and we are very grateful for it.
So is there a way to see the questions that people left so that I could see them later? Did you write them down or?
There is a recording of this chat.
Oh, okay, there is,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm. And there is also a recording of the entire webinar, so you will get also a link, and this link will be also available on social media for all the participants.
Okay.
So once again, thank you very much. Thank you for your contributions, and see you in Belgium or in the virtual space.
Yes, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.